Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining for day 5 at South by Southwest. We're getting into the session that we have listed up here. Oh yes, thank you for the clicker. I realized I'm gonna have to use telepathy to flip these slides. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into it and tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Noor Naseer, and I sit on a team called Media Innovations and Technology at Basis. I'll tell you a little bit about them for context and why I'm speaking about misinformation in just a moment, but exploring what is happening in the advertising world from an innovation perspective, emerging trends, observing insights that matter to advertisers is a priority for everybody who works in the ad business, and I'm fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time doing that. Along my side, I have come and presented at South by for the last few years, and this year Ryan has agreed to present alongside me, so thanks to Ryan for joining in. Oh look, there we go. There's Ryan, and a special shout out also to Caitlin O'Brien, who helps me put together insights and research. She's not here today, but she's an important part of this team as well. And if you guys want to advance the slide again for me, if it's possible to do that. Maybe Ryan, you want to advance for me? Just want to tell you just a smidgen about Basis, like why do I work there? Why do I do this work at this particular company in the advertising space? And this title says exactly what it is that there's so much focus on for our organization. We're trying to solve the advertising industry's biggest problems. And I worked for a massive holding company for the first couple of years of my experience in this business. And I was oftentimes pained by some of the challenges that it was not my job to fix. It was just my job to be subjected to those things. So now I'm happy to say that I get to think about a lot of different problems and how we can contextualize them and make change happen. So I think it's the responsibility of anybody who is in the advertising business and speaking to an audience to be cognizant of that audience. So I'm gonna do some learning about who is here today and ask folks a couple of questions. Who here works for an advertising agency? And if you can really participate, give me a show of hands. So it's a lot of people. Okay, good, maybe like 50% of the crowd. How about anybody who works for a brand or is in a marketing organization? Okay, it's probably like the other half. Who works potentially in journalism or media? Okay, I feel like we're almost at 100% there. Who doesn't do any of those things? I wanna know if, okay. I'd love to talk to you later. I wanna go on like an investigative search and talk to you guys about what else you do, but there's a lot of reasons to be curious about misinformation, and I think a lot of the relevant folks are obviously here today. So if you wanna advance the slide again for me, there's a lot of clicks, so Ryan, maybe if you wanna actually slip over there and help with some of that advancement. Wait, I wouldn't flip through all those, hold on a second, there's so many clicks to do. Advertising is something, as I wanna set the stage here, something that can be good, ideally, but sometimes advertising is, you wanna hit that slide for me? Can be bad, and oftentimes it can also be in the middle, and it can be complicated, and I wanna contextualize that. So you wanna flip for me? So what is good? Good is ideally the desirable outcome that all of us run ads for. We wanna reach the right person, the right place, at the right time. That's the ideal scenario. That's always been the ideal scenario. But in particular, we're gonna focus on the right place because that has context relative to misinformation. So what's bad? And bad in theory is the opposite of what I said, right? Like wrong person, wrong place, wrong time. But there are a lot of things that can contribute to that. And those things include ad fraud. Oh, maybe this is gonna work. Amazing. Privacy violations and misinformation, just to name a couple of things that make advertising not the experience that we want to deliver and or have audiences receive. But there's something also beyond that. It's the complicated, which is we don't want to run across bot traffic in ad fraud spaces. We don't want to be running ideally on fake news. We don't want to target people who don't share their data with us and compromise the integrity of data that is personal and private. But unfortunately, that's what makes advertising so complicated in today's day and age. We're constantly playing whack-a-mole, trying to swat away bad actors who are trying to prevent us from doing what we're actually tasked to do. And it's not as, it's not a dichotomy of you're always doing good versus you're doing bad. We're so often playing in this middle space that makes it complicated. So something happened in just 2 months ago. It was the World Economic Forum, and they released a global risks report where they survey 900 industry and policymakers and folks who are leaned into understanding risk at the highest levels globally. And this was their finding. It was that misinformation is the most pressing risk over the next 2 years for countries, businesses, and individuals. And to contextualize that further, they were sorting across a series of different global risks of environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological relevance. And across all these different categories, misinformation was at the top. And it also is something that has a cascading effect across all these other negative global risks that are affecting our world. So let's contextualize misinformation and disinformation with a little more detail as it relates to advertising and why it is that we are so responsible and culpable for what is happening in relation to it. Who really finances that? It's us. We're the ones who finance it, whether we think about it that way or not. And that's why organizations, industry trade organizations like the 4As, and imagine if you work for an agency, you're particularly relevant with them, the Association for Advertising, the Association for American Advertising Agencies. And over here, they have these responsible principles that we're intended to adhere to. They've had these for an extended number of years, and no misinformation or disinformation is consistently on that list. So to contextualize it just a little further, they had a lot of write-up on what we're supposed to do in the advertising world, but specifically, we have this. Advertising should not fund or the distribution or misinformation or disinformation. Platforms where misinformation and disinformation is a recurring concern must have mechanisms to fact-check information published by high-profile or high-reach accounts. Does that sound right to you guys? Like, that's something we should prioritize? I feel like that feels obvious for a lot of folks. But incidentally, now it feels like the opposite is the case. So X, in the last couple of years, formerly Twitter, they updated their content moderation policies, and some of those updates included this. The discarding of misinformation policies related to some of the areas that are most likely to have misinformation associated with them, including global crises, election outcomes, and also health information. Secondarily, there would be softer sanctions on policy violations, including limits on reach, but not removal of bad actors. So Elon Musk has come out and said it's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. Maybe many of you have heard that. And also this, that there would be less frequent releases of transparency reports. In fact, they haven't released many in terms of really dedicating themselves and sharing information back with advertisers who want to know what's happening as far as harmful behavior across this platform. And just one other quote that was recently released on Elon's X. He said, "Content moderation is a steaming pile of horse manure, and the platforms that enforce it are nothing more than digital tyrants trying to control what we can and can't say. So let's give a big middle finger to content moderation and embrace the chaos of the internet." This is going to come back up. So we'll switch over from that, because maybe some people have pulled back on Twitter/X utilization, but I know one of the biggest platforms out there that so many advertisers spend across, amongst a couple, is Meta. And Mark Zuckerberg has also had a recent change of tune. He said a couple of things. It's time to get back to our roots around freedom of expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. Also, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X starting in the US. So these are some shifts, and shifts that advertisers are grappling with. So we're gonna take a little poll of everybody, so I need a little bit more participation. Just given everything that we've shared, and I'm sure many of you have followed the news and are aware of these changes, and you're having these conversations inside of your organizations. I'm asking this question: is content moderation a priority for your campaigns? I've got a couple different answers, and then I'll do the poll after I show the answers. A, it's a critical priority. We run ads when strict moderation policies are intact. That's when we do it. B, it's an important consideration, a factor, but not a determining one. And C, it's not a factor. We're into chaos. So let me start off with A. It's a critical priority. We run ads when strict moderation policies are intact. Is that a priority for your organization? Okay, just giving everybody a chance. There's like, some people are giving me like a high rate. Some people are like, I think so. Okay, pull on that. B, it's an important consideration, a factor, but not a determining one. Okay, got more hands up on that. And then finally, you're ready to embrace the chaos of the internet. Who's gonna put up their hand? Okay, there's no hand raises. Okay, so we got a lot of B, which admittedly, and A was the second choice. I'm not surprised to see that, because that's really what makes this complicated when we have a multitude of responsibilities as people who run ads, and we'll talk more about that. I also want to share, as a part of that previous consideration, this was recently released in Fortune, and I'll share at the end of our presentation. We're going to share sources for all the information that we're providing. So if people want to take a closer look at this article released by the CEO of Stagwell, he had this point: journalism is being drained by overzealous brand safety censorship. So this isn't a person who's a tech CEO, but somebody who is responsible for managing the welfare of advertiser dollars, saying that sometimes it is too much. In fact, there's so much brand safety that's being put forth that we're no longer even able to finance the types of things that make media great, like actual journalism organizations with integrity, because we're stripping ourselves away from news and spaces because AI and technologies that we're using are saying that those are not spaces that we want to run in. So it's kind of a recurring theme of concern, but also one that's been most recently brought up in a context on behalf of the consideration of advertisers spending at very high levels. So as I shift over into the next section of our presentation, I'm going to have Ryan actually step up and tell us a little bit more, take us a step back. I've done the table setting. He's going to tell us more about misinformation.
Super. I'm going to grab the clicker from you.
Yes, of course.
Wonderful. Cool. So, yeah, we're, how many minutes in? 15 minutes into the presentation, and we're going to define what misinformation is, make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you think about that and you ask, what is information? I think the simplest definition that we were able to come up with is that it's false or inaccurate information. Makes sense, right? But it's kind of one of those circular definitions because, one, the word information is in the definition, which you're not supposed to do, but it creates this, I don't know, like kind of gray area to really be able to better define what that is, because what is accurate information? What is inaccurate information? What is truthful information? There's a bit of that gray area because the reality is that media has been democratized where so many people are able to contribute to it. It's not just journalists today. There are citizen journalists. There are influencers. There are internet trolls. There are big corporations that have very masterful PR blitzes. To go through and impact and better understand what that information ultimately is. So it creates a little bit of blurriness, a little bit of confusion that's there. If you look at some like basic journalistic understanding of misinformation or malinformation or disinformation, it all kind of bubbles up to the same thing, right? It's about a level of inaccuracy, and ultimately these definitions are going to vary based upon intent and the level of falseness that's associated with it. But at the end of the day, if you're in here and you're interested in advertising and marketing within the digital media sphere, really all misinformation is bad. I think we can agree with that we don't want to be associated with that. We'll break that down a little bit further about what that impact is on your brand, on your organization, and just on your media campaign, that investment that's there. But all this idea of misinformation that we're faced with, it's a massive, massive challenge. And so when any of us are faced with a challenge, whether it's from a professional perspective, a personal perspective, maybe it's against our morals, our ethics, there's kind of three phases that we generally go through. And let me see if these resonate with y'all. The first, this idea of acknowledging this is a problem. This is a big deal. This is something that we're facing. There's that talk, there's that understanding, a little bit of research, and then ultimately drives to a point of calling for accountability. We need action. We're reaching out to regulators. We're reaching out to trade groups. We're calling out those big organizations that maybe are complicit in whatever that negative action is that we've got a concern with, that big problem. But human nature is, we kind of get to a point that we're all riled up. This is a big issue. This is something that we need to really take care of. And we get to a point that, is it really that important anymore? I've got other things to deal with. Or there's a new big problem that comes in. I think from an advertising perspective, especially those folks, I think particularly on the agency side, is that this idea of apathy kind of sets in, where we just come to accept it a little bit. And I think part of that challenge is, if you happen to be a media buyer, you've got different goals. You're literally incentivized. Your job is to run these campaigns and be as effective as possible. So the big challenge of maybe misinformation, it's kind of a little too daunting to maybe take on and feel like you can be in control and you can be empowered, that you're focused on the KPIs for your campaign. You're focused on getting that campaign completed and moving on to the next one. So this is really kind of where we're at right now, this kind of apathetic type of spot. But my hope is, I think our hope is, by the end of the presentation, you'll be a little bit more excited to want to take some action. There is this really interesting dichotomy that's happening though, because even though that we're at this somewhat apathetic state, a recent survey of leading advertisers, 60% of them said that brand safety is a priority for them. So if it's a priority, why aren't we focused more on this? Why aren't we encouraging our teams, our organizations, the groups that we work with to take more action? Well, there's a few different reasons, and we'll get into what all those are. I think one of the most fascinating areas is the dollars that are flowing through, how we're all incentivized, and all the different groups and organizations that are involved with it. This is just a snapshot of media investment over the course of 2025, what these estimates are. If you look at digital spend, by and large, it is the biggest piece of the pie. Not a big surprise for anybody that's in here or has worked in this industry for a while. We're talking almost $350 billion. This is just within the United States. And when you compare that to some of those other channels that are out there, whether it's print, out of home, radio, TV, that all adds up. You're talking less than $80 billion. Feels weird to say just $80 billion, but it's a small piece of the pie when you're talking the overall media investment. So if we just focus on the digital space, this is where it is most problematic for a few different reasons. One, the amount of dollars that are there. So it's that opportunity for more of those bad actors to want to come into play and try to get a larger share of that, get their piece of it. But also just within the digital media sphere, what's happened over really the last 10 years is that more and more of it has become automated. It's become programmatic. In fact, this year, estimates are nearly 92% of display dollars are going to be programmatic. And that makes it messy, right? There's so many different players. You look at the whole media supply flow, all those different players that are out there. there's the lack of transparency, and it creates some other challenges. So Noor's going to talk through this next one, and then I'll jump back in. So I'm just, yes.
Hello? Oh, we're back on. Okay, so we're going to flip to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. And there's so many clicks, so let me click on this bad boy. So I want to talk through what's happening, right? Like, I would characterize it as actually there's a lot of reasons that people may be holding back. It's probably not necessarily apathy in this instance. There's apathy that occurs when we have other priorities that come to the table, but here there are other layers of complexity that bring us to a space where we can't react and we get put into a position where we're facing that complication. So here's a little bit more about the supply chain that brings these bad actors and gets them popping up so often. So first, we've got media creation. And in this instance, what I mean by media creation is that publishers make websites that we want to run across. And from there, advertisers can purchase inventory because there's ad enablement there and there's an intent to reach eyeballs there. From there, you can actually activate your campaign, but then people can observe where the purchases are taking place, what's happening in the supply chain, what type of inventory are people purchasing. And it's at that point that people are looking at media monetization opportunities, not just good actors who want to reflect and do as others do it with sincerity and intent to do the good side of advertising. It's also the bad actors who see that there are billions of dollars to be made on the back of creating inventory that sort of looks like it, or you know what, we want to optimize it and make sure that more clicks, more activity is happening on the sites without an appreciation for the fact that misinformation shouldn't be happening there, that we need to be doing fact checking, that we shouldn't be using AI generated content and the likes to create what we're putting out there for advertisers, and knowing all the tricks they need to be placing in order to slide it through these supply channels. And that's where harmful practices are incentivized because they keep slipping in, and from there, they start to pollute the ecosystem, right? It affects every part of this chamber, essentially, and advertisers are constantly trying to flick off the switch on the supply spaces or publishers that are not reflective of the type of consideration set that they historically would have built. Ryan mentioned programmatic advertising earlier. How many folks in the room are familiar with programmatic in particular? Okay, a lot of folks, thankfully. Okay, so the importance there is that I mentioned consideration set lists. So as a person who formerly worked in not just digital, but non-digital spaces, you'd have a list, right? You know where you're running, you understand everything about those properties. So much advertising is programmatic now, so we're put into a place where we can't possibly keep track of everything, and we have to keep going back to saying, what's happening out there? How do we check in on it? How do we make sure that we're following up with our partners so we can keep the bad actors away, the bad supply sources away, so we're doing what we actually intend to with our media investments? I think with that, Ryan, I can turn it back to you.
I'm going to grab this. Thank you. So 2025, a lot of these things, when we think about misinformation, they're not necessarily new, but there are some unique things that are happening this year that I think are going to have a greater impact, that are worth our consideration in understanding how we can tackle, how we can address this, and how we can work around all the bad misinformation that's out there. And so the first, I would say, political division, political divisiveness. Not news for anybody, but guess what? The country, the world, is more divided than ever. News break. And this is only going to get worse, I think, before it gets better, unfortunately. But I think with that division, people are motivated to spread that message, right? Spread the message that they want to put out there, whether it's in favor of what they believe or against, sometimes, who they're against. Secondarily, AI-generated content. This is both amazing and awe-inspiring and frightening. The level, the speed to be able to generate content, and I'm not just talking written content, we're talking the video, the deep fakes, the images that are out there, and then the scale to be able to get that. It is a huge, huge problem, and again, is only going to be more of an issue, and I think we're going to see it not peak, but hit a tipping point within 2025. And then finally, we talked about social media platforms. Again, not anything necessarily new with the challenges, but we're faced with new challenges with removing some of those guardrails around content moderation. Just becomes more and more of a challenge on top of all those dollars that are flowing through. And again, more and more of those bad actors wanting to come and participate and get their piece of that. So when we think about misinformation, is all of it bad? Is there some that's good or some maybe that's better than others? I think the majority of it is probably not what we want to associate our ads with, our campaigns. But I think this really comes down to each individual brand, what they stand for, what they're comfortable with, what type of content they're okay being around. And so just want to talk through a few. The first couple, satire and parody. If you're running an ad on, let's say, The Onion, I think most people recognize that, hey, this is a satirical site. That those headlines, unfortunately, even though many of them may feel like they're coming true every day, for the most part, it's in good fun, right? So we're okay with that, but that could be defined as misinformation. And even, this one may be a little bit of a stretch, but the idea of sponsored content, the good old advertorial, right? I think the majority of them are actually labeled properly, but could be in a way positioned that it could be interpreted as misinformation. I think for the most part, people are more acceptable with these, they're more comfortable with that. But when we get down to some of these others, this is where I think it starts to get a little bit more of a challenge. The idea of photo manipulation. We talked about AI-generated images. It's photo, video that's out there. I think that's definitely concerning. Just pure propaganda. Nobody really wants to be around that, whether it's from political organizations or it's from large organizations, companies that are pushing their message. And then finally, just the general idea of news fabrication, right? If it is truly fake news, can't imagine you really want to be around that. So these are some things that we need to look for and that we need to better understand. And so I don't think it starts with consumers, but all of us, regardless of what our roles are, whether we're on an agency side, the brand marketing side, on the journalism side, we all have an individual responsibility as well. And I think there's some really basic things that we can do that also apply from an advertising and marketing perspective. So generally, you can consider the source, right? You go to a website, you're reading something, you're consuming it, somebody shared it. Where's that coming from, right? Are they an authority on this? Is this somebody that I should respect and I should look to for that information? A lot of times it's headlines. They're amazing. You go to the headline and you think you're going to read something about this topic and prove this point, and then you actually read it and it seems completely counter to what the headline is. So I think that's a good reminder, a good check there. Verifying who that author is. Are they actually a real person? Are they an AI bot? Are they somebody with a hidden agenda? Are they paid by some organization? Are they a pundit with some organization as well? I think just verifying that. The supporting sources. I think this is amazing, just from a pure research perspective. I'm sure everybody's dealt with. As you go through, you're reading something, there's citations that are there. You actually go look at what's being cited and realize that whatever that research is, whatever that report, it's actually in contradiction to what that article is about. So I think just verifying that and making sure that that's accurate. Checking the date. Number of times that you see something get shared and it's 2 years, 4 years, 10 years old, may not have the same application today. May not have the same meaning, the same context. Seeing if it's a joke, right? If it's satire, if it's just pure parody, people get outraged about that and they may not double check it. Checking your biases, right? We all have our own feelings about certain things, and sometimes we're looking to validate those. So I think just making sure that, hey, all right, is this something that could our own judgment be clouding and impacting that? And then finally, asking experts. I think seeking out people who are true authorities within the space, and maybe multiple people, to really be able to verify that. When all else fails, you can always go to the library, right? Talk to your friendly librarian. So we talked about this kind of rising need for action and the amount of dollars that are flowing through, some of these challenges that are there. But to get into a little bit more before we talk about what advertisers can do and their ultimate responsibility, just the realization that 54% of internet users today are utilizing social media to get their news. Again, that's where it becomes a little bit more of a problem, is we don't have some of these fact checking, we don't have some of this content moderation in place. That on itself is not terrible, but again, it starts to get a little bit more tricky. And the reality is that those users who are utilizing social media to seek out and get their news information, they're suspect to what they're reading. They're concerned that some of what they're coming across that's being shared with them may actually be misinformation. This is a problem, not just from a pure information and kind of newsworthiness perspective, but it has such a negative impact on the overarching industry, the advertising industry, because 70% of users view at least half of online ads as untrustworthy due to misinformation. That's really scary. I think anybody that works within advertising, or even if you work on the journalist side, if you're a publisher, it's really concerning. That's what's paying the bills for the ecosystem. That's what's supporting journalism. That's what's keeping governments in check, keeping organizations in check. If those consumers, if those users, if they don't trust the ads, advertising is not going to work. It's not going to be effective. So this is really a call for all of you, the positions that you sit, the organizations that you sit at, to be able to put together some change. Because from an advertising perspective, we think about what is advertising. Again, at its most basic level, it is about information. It's about informing. It's about persuading. It's about reminding people about those goods, those services, those products, whatever it may be, but trying to convince them and get them excited about it. But if you're around not credible information, if you're around just fake news, if you're around really inappropriate content, that becomes a huge challenge. And I would imagine many of you may feel like, hey, we're already proactive to a point. We're already doing some things. But recent research shows that 2 out of 3 advertisers have bought ads that have been on sites containing misinformation. I think this number is way too low, but this is the most recent number that I could find. And I would guess those other 1 out of 3, it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen, right? So we need to be proactive. We need to make sure that all of the planning, the strategy, the coordination, everything that we do, that it's for good purpose. Because the consequences it has on advertisers, if we're not taking action and we're not more proactive about it, are going to be huge. Consumers are going to lose trust, not just within the ads, but in the brand itself. They're going to be less likely to actually purchase intent, not going to go up, it's going to go down. It may just completely evaporate. And our brand's value, that reputational value, is going to get eroded. So there is no time to wait. Inaction is not an option. So I will hand it over to Noor to talk through some interesting approaches of what you all can do to incorporate more proactivity.
If I can grab the clicker from you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and I just wanted to say, actually, just as I'm listening to the presentation, I actually think there are advertisers that want to run in fake news and propaganda, actually. It just depends on what their priorities are, and that's really the question to be asked, like, what are we comfortable running in? That's really a core of this conversation as well. So as far as taking action, it's really action that makes sense for the brand that you represent or multiple brands. So it starts off with really looking at this, when you're doing that pulse check. We need to navigate the new normal of a very fast-moving and changing internet. So I'd say that there are 3 baselines to consider. It starts off with these ongoing changing platform policies, which there are a multitude of, followed by what are the priorities of the brand, which I just mentioned a second ago, I won't over-explain it. And then this is the challenge where I think there's the dichotomy of what am I actually tasked to do? You're not necessarily responsible for fixing all of the problems in the world, right? I think it's what am I supposed to do about misinformation when I'm actually tasked to hit goals relative to the campaigns that I'm executing? One can't outweigh the other, but I want to be considerate of both. So we know this, that the internet is overflowing with all types of content. I know you all can't see this super closely, but these are all examples of MFA or made for advertising sites, which it's, I think, a little bit up in the air who wants to and who doesn't want to run across those, because they're in a little bit of a gray area. They're not necessarily fraudulent places. It's not usually bot traffic necessarily, but it may not be desirable for sure. And so much of this can be bad from the perspective of each advertiser that's considering it. So I wanted us to take a look at leaning into a plan for media, or paid media in particular. What are some principles of stewardship that we need to take on? Just core values. This goes a little bit beyond just misinformation, but things we need to lean into to be responsible stewards. And it starts off with considering brand suitability, followed by an appreciation for data ethics, so that expands beyond the scope of today's presentation, but it's a constant point of contention for advertisers to stay on top of, followed by leaning into what responsible journalism looks like, how we're able to access it and put it on our plans, followed by cause-based media, again, scoping outside of our presentation, but a part of the responsible conversation. And finally, media quality. What is the quality of that media? Now, for the purposes of today, we're leaning into the three: the suitability piece, making sure that we're taking advantage of responsible journalism, having a hard stance on what that looks like for our brand, whoever that brand is, or a multitude, and the quality of it, right? Because, again, going back to MFAs and everything that falls in between that and real high-quality premium content, those are gray areas, and they need constant evaluation. So I wanted to take a moment and actually lean into, what does questioning look like? What are the questions that we need to be asking? And I want to inspire some thoughts from this particular video. Are there any Portlandia fans in the room? Okay, we got some fans. Okay, so maybe there's a lot of people who have not seen this clip, or it's been a minute since you've looked at it. So let's go ahead and play this. Again, the intent is making sure we're asking the right types of questions.
Hello.
Hi, hello.
My name is Dana. I'll be taking care of you today. If you have any questions about the menu, please let me know.
I guess I do have a question about the chicken, if you could just tell us a little bit more about it.
The chicken is a heritage breed, woodland-raised chicken that's been fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy, and hazelnuts.
Okay, this is local?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you just one more time, and it's local.
It is.
Is that USDA organic, or Oregon organic, or Portland organic?
It's just all across the board, organic.
The hazelnuts, these are local?
How big is the area where the chickens are able to roam free?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I had exactly the same question.
4 acres. Give me just a second. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
She's nice, right?
We're doing the right thing.
I'm too apologetic.
You are.
I drove way too slow here today, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'm so weird with that gas pedal. The thing just moves the whole vehicle forward now.
All right, so here is the chicken you'll be enjoying tonight.
You have this information. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. His name was Colin. Here are his papers, okay?
That's great. He looks like a happy little guy who runs around. A lot of friends, other chickens as friends. Putting his little wing around another one and kind of like palling around.
I don't know that I can speak to that level of intimate knowledge about him. They do a lot to make sure that their chickens are very happy.
When you say they, I mean, who are these people raising Colin?
It's a farm that's located about 30 miles south of Portland.
And you have a good relationship with this farm?
We do.
But is that some guy on a yacht who lives in Miami?
Oh,
who's
goodness,
just
no.
saying that he's organic?
It tears at the core of my being, the idea of someone just cashing in on a trend like organic.
No, I know the type, no.
Yeah.
Tell you what, we're gonna go check it out if you don't mind. Just if you could hold our seats.
Oh, no?
Yeah, and we'll be right back. Just want to make sure.
You know, thank you so much, Dana.
Sure.
Asking the tough questions. Depending upon your circumstances, and obviously here they had their concerns and they're gonna continue their investigative piece here, but let's take a closer look. about the knowledge that was collected on Colin, concern about consumption in this particular instance. Who have we got? Who are the key characters here? We've got our customers, and we've got our waitress, the person who's gonna do the purveying to us. And the customers, they're asking those tough questions that need to be asked to understand the quality of what it is that they are gonna procure. So they're asking, what's differentiating these labels? Is it USDA organic? Is it Seattle organic? Is it Portland organic? What have you? Followed by a healthy skepticism for false claims and ulterior motives. What you're saying to me, can I trust that it's true? Assess the environment and treatment of Colin, confirming and reconfirming the origin, just making sure that they have all the information. Simultaneously, what was the waitress able to offer back? She was equipped to answer questions, she provided documentation and proof, and we ideally want somebody who's gonna be knowledgeable and honest. And this also applies in the same capacity for us as advertisers and any publisher or provider of a solution that we wanna lean into in our journey seeking to stay away from misinformation. So I want to take us home with a couple of points on things that we can do. Who are some of the partners out there that can help us with misinformation, but also some broader brand suitability considerations and controls. And this is just a sliver of some of the partners out there here on the list. I've got Scope 3, NewsGuard, FactMata, and also Adfontes. 3 of them in particular are leaned into keeping us, two of them in particular are focused on what are the ratings associated with fake news, propaganda, sexism, bias, and so forth. NewsGuard and FactMata as listed here. And Adfontes, they can do similar things, but they're also in the business of helping you decide, meaning how do I figure out what are the biases or the slanting associated with any type of news? You need to say, again, does that align with the values of the brand? It's not for any one person to make that decision, and the evaluation needs to be ongoing. Media publications change, right? People change, tech platforms change. What's true today isn't true tomorrow. So we need to have that constant conversation. Scope 3 goes more into a broader space where we're looking at other responsible media considerations such as emissions testing, because carbon footprint is another area of study on my team. That's for another presentation, maybe that's for next year. And we have so many other partners that we look to see how do we evaluate this inventory, especially programmatic inventory, all the digital inventory out there. How do we lean in and make sure we're only securing what's appropriate or as close as we can to only the good spaces? Also a follow-up here on just staying away from undesirable activity because people are spending so much money on media investment. So a couple of different partners that help with the broader space, just the halo effect. Misinformation is part of a larger category of bad action that's taking place. So DeepSea is an example. They have capabilities around identifying fraud, the types of websites that also are likely to include misinformation. Followed by ad looks, where they're focusing on ensuring ads are just viewable. That's also not often a priority always for misinformation or low-grade sites. So ensuring viewability is a larger topic, but also relevant in this vein. And also double verify, which I imagine many people in this room are already familiar with. It's interesting, and maybe I'll wrap on this first. They have this particular point that they are going to ensure that impressions, not just CTV ones, but other ones in digital ecosystems are ones that are going to be delivered on devices that are turned on. So another problem with ad fraud or low quality impressions or no quality impressions, you are not even verifying or validating that your media dollars are being spent in any type of valuable way, or at least a portion of them are. And I have a couple other points as far as like thinking about the supply path. So there's questions about just supply path optimization has been a rising topic for the last couple of years. Also curation, that's been a big topic of conversation. How do we bring together the types of sites that we know we're gonna be comfortable with, or supply sources that have been consistent in ensuring that we are running in spaces that are appropriate for our advertisers and their belief system. So establishing that the chain that you're using is an appropriate one, and that typically this role falls to the responsibility of a DSP or a demand-side platform. It doesn't exclusively fall to them, but it's something where when we go back to the Portlandia video, when we need to be asking these tough questions, we need to have a very clear sense of what the strategy is. The strategy should be provided to us, or we need to work together to understand what our strategy needs to be. So I wanted to land on some things to just bring us home on advertisers avoiding misinformation. Starting off with just taking a pulse, taking a moment to assess what the client's expectations are and focusing on education. We need to know what's happening out there and also what's changing associated with spaces that are making money on the back of ads. And those are spaces that could also be prevalent for misinforming our audiences and maybe places we don't want to run. Or where's the gray space? When are we comfortable potentially still landing there because we need to make some modifications to our brand safety standards? Using a combination, number 2, of both technology but also people. I think we're obsessed in today's world that it's all tech. The only partners that are valuable are the ones that are using and spending a lot of money on AI and using systems that are going to do all the work on our behalf. If all the AI sessions that are happening at South by, all the news that's available in the zeitgeist today have told us anything, is that technology alone is not enough, whether it's related to misinformation or some other categories. We're still in early days, so making sure that there's human eyes doing a review of what detection processes exist related to partners, that absolutely needs to happen, and there needs to be a POV on how that's going to come to the table. We need to prioritize transparency. Both transparency that we're going to pass down to our brands that we are working on behalf of, and that's going to set ourselves up for putting systems in place, workflows, to say we have the answers whether or not people are asking for them, so we have this collective sense of awareness. Conducting audits. How can we review campaign data spontaneously to ensure that if ads are running in places that are flagged sites, that we need to cut things off and we need to move away because the whack-a-mole game continues? Using intelligence tools, I just said, like, it can't just be AI, but it should also include AI. If there are intelligence tools that can make sure that we are classifying spaces that are reliable versus ones that are unreliable and unsubstantiated, then we need to be able to make that distinction and again do some ongoing review of that. And then finally, know your supply, question your partners, demand transparency from them, and follow up with regularity. Set the benchmark for what that is supposed to look like. And with that, before we jump to Q&A, because we have a little bit of time for that, I mentioned this at the top of the presentation that this is what I do all day, every day. It's a blessing and a joy that I get to explore a lot of different topics. So some of what we talked about today, it's a reflection of this other presentation, the rise of responsible media. I have conversations with brands and advertisers all the time. That's what I get to do. And so if anybody, whether it's looking closer at this presentation or looking and exploring future presentations, I'm here to support that and continue the conversation. So in order to do that, you may be interested potentially in connecting with me. So I've got my LinkedIn over here, but you may also be interested in the slides that were presented today. So an amazing gal that I work with named Lilia Diaz, she went ahead and designed today's slides. So thanks to Lilia for all the labor that she put into the deck. But if you want to grab them, please grab this QR code. Or if for some reason you don't grab it, connect with me, and I'm happy to talk through what we went through and any additional questions you may have. So I also have a podcast, so if you want to follow that, it's called Ad Tech Unfiltered. And with that, if people want to ask any questions, we've got a mic right here in the middle of the room, and we've got some time. I think we could take a couple questions. So if there are any, please line up. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, thank you for sharing your presentation. Oh, could you hear me?
Yeah, you just want to keep it close to the mouth, yeah.
I'm curious, after the Meta's other moderation policy changes, have you already seen some significant changes in ad space or more broadly?
And you're asking about Meta in particular?
Yes, Meta in particular.
So I would say what I have noticed, and actually this is a good question to like ask people in the room too, because it's hard to assess. Meta is the only one who really knows if there's been a dip in ad spend, right? Like I suppose there could be journalists who have a beat in the media space and maybe they've got some tips on that. But ultimately, I think there hasn't been as great of a slowdown as what we would otherwise expect. Like I think Mark he reminds me of the earlier stages of how Elon approached this in 21 when he first was being a little bit more gentle in his communication. And because this is, I think it was an abrupt shift for a lot of advertisers to hear this kind of news, he is trying to carefully leverage the right type of language to motivate advertisers to stay with the platform and to continue to spend. So I would say right now, I haven't heard reporting of like massive shifts. And I think a lot of advertisers, they're dealing with that balance of saying, I need to still run in effective places. And unless I'm hearing otherwise that there's been a sudden shift in the way that people are interacting with Meta and Meta properties, and I think a lot of advertisers are sticking to it. So that's my take at this moment, but it's ongoing, like taking an evaluation of what's happening.
Okay. And if we can run through the experience from the X Twitter changes, so what can you point out?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
If we can run through the other Twitter X the significant changes, what can you point out? What can we?
What can we like learn from the changes that have occurred there?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different points of consideration. Like, how important was Twitter/X for any unique advertiser? And I think some people, actually a lot of advertisers have pulled away. I think a lot of really media creators have pulled away from the platform too. So there's been a lot more heat, I would say, on X as a platform, but they've also sustained a lot of people who obsessively built and curated their audiences over a long period of time. There are going to be advertisers who justify and understand why they want to continue spending there. Is there anything to learn? It's tough to say right now. I mean, there's so many very unique factors that are affecting X, given the leadership, given their priorities, that they're, I'd say, an anomaly and something that has never happened before in the media space. Unless somebody feels otherwise, like it's one of those both of these brands, these media brands, these media tech platforms are in uncharted territory. So it feels impossible to say, this is a big learning in this moment, because I don't know that anybody can replicate what they've done right now, because you have to have the power and influence of the ownership to like make moves that are similar to that. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. I'm David from the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising in London.
Amazing.
It's a related question really to the one that just came before. There's a big difference between X and the Meta platforms in terms of reach, I think. And
yes.
So I'm just wondering if there were an advertiser, a big advertiser, who is very principled and perhaps fell into your category A, and really did want to move away from the Meta platforms, whether that's something you would find a way of educating them for in terms of being able to get the reach, or is it just hopeless at the moment that the reach of Meta is so great that all you can do is cut down rather than eliminate altogether?
I think that a lot of advertisers are having that conversation, like whether it's agencies or brands, they're talking to themselves and saying, what is the impact? If we walk away from this, what's the comparative consideration point or consideration platform, publisher, supplier that we can turn to? And you're right, from a scale perspective, it's tough to compete with Meta. And there's other challenges with other platforms. Like Google has separate and different challenges that they're reconciling, right? If you're a big player, it's chilly at the top, right? Like when you have a lot of scope, you'd have very big legal teams that are dealing with many challenges that advertisers are actively grappling with, including massive crises that we're dealing with. So it's very much, I think, in this moment that advertisers are saying, what can I do that we can be comfortable enough with? I don't think anybody's fully comfortable right now. They're saying, how do we stay afloat in this moment where advertising is like getting a deep shakeup? Like, we're really in a renaissance period. There are people, I think it would be reasonable to say, I don't know what's going to happen to a lot of jobs if there is a massive shakeup relative to spending in some of these spaces, especially with some of these tech platforms. There's so much to stay so close to. So I don't have a perfect answer for your question right now, but that's a great question to ask. I think like for people in the audience who've joined and they work again on behalf of a brand, they're definitely doing a quiet reconciliation and seeing what kind of temperament does my brand have. We're gonna move forward until we hear otherwise. If the zeitgeist starts crying out and saying like what we're doing is absolutely wrong, then maybe we'll step away. But for right now, let's see what's practical for us. Thank you.
Hi, terrific presentation.
Thank you.
I'm Nelson. I'm a CEO from an ad agency in Brazil, and we have some public clients in Brazil. Brazilian government and society are a large victim of misinformation in the last few years, and it's clear for me that we lost the chance to regulate them for the next couple of years. Although Brazilian government is trying to still regulate the platforms, they feel that they can't be out of the platforms, so they don't lose the battle. Is there any example worldwide of a boycott or something like that that was effective in any country?
I can't speak to a country-based boycott at this moment. I think, if anything, actually, and I didn't bring it up in the presentation, that there have been industry organizations that are responsible for responsible media and making sure that we align with the biggest advertisers who have the greatest spend. So some people in the room, for folks that are still here, GARM, the Global Association for Responsible Media, they shut down like very recently because they oversaw investments for Mars, Wrigley, Unilever, right? These massive global brands that were aligning with GARM. And because they were threatened to be sued for withholding dollars from X, actually, they decided that the legal repercussions were too great, and so they shut down. So it's literally the opposite of what you're describing in this moment. The power balance is very complicated in this moment, so I think that, I hate to keep saying the same thing, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen next. This moment is so, if anyone were to say with certainty that they know what's going to happen from here, in an unpredictable environment like what we're dealing with now, this is something that media and advertising journalists have never seen before. So I very much am hesitant to put forth any type of strategy that potentially maybe a country has put forth or observe them attempting to put something forth. There's much more observation at this stage of the game. So again, it seems like I'm giving a lot of non-answers, but that's just my honest observation from my vantage point.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think if there aren't any further questions, we're right around at time. Again, please do connect with me if you want to talk after the session. Me and Ryan will be around. Thank you guys for joining the session. Love connecting with people in the advertising community and wishing you a great rest of your day at South by Southwest. Thanks, everyone.